and yet you're all staying in Airbnb.
No.
We're Airbnb hosts.
You're all Airbnb
We're all hosts.
Yeah.
I see. Now I have the
Stay in
connection.
Airbnb, I love you all.
So I don't know how much you know about the history of Cork, but if you were standing on this spot back in the 1700s, ladies and gentlemen, you wouldn't have been standing at all, you would have been falling. And then you would have been drowning, because this was the river. It was called King's Dock, and ships would sail all the way up here in the water, and they'd stop in front of this building, which used to be the Crawford. It's an art gallery now. In the old days, it was the customs house for the city. It's where people would pay their taxes for all the groups. All the goods that were taken away on the boats to foreign parts of the world. All of the major streets in Cork were once canals. The ships would sail all up and down them. You probably know this. South Mall, when you're on South Mall, you can see steps going up from the outside to the second story of the buildings. That's because they'd be getting out of the boats onto the steps. That whole street was a river. Washington Street, Grand Parade, all the same way. It was all rivers. Cork, in fact, was known in Europe. It was known as the Venice of the North. The ships would all sail all throughout the city. And it was only when the bridges were built that stopped the ships from coming all the way up that all of that stopped. And then, sure, there was no point having canals anymore when there was no ships, so they covered over them all. But the river is actually still flowing underneath these very streets, infested with millions and millions of rats. It's true, Cork is built on the backs of rats. So many rats that if they all moved the same direction at the same time, the whole city would topple over. Now, this was a bright spark of a young girl. Jesus, look at her. She was good looking, she always had a smile on her face, and she was very diligent with her work. And her best friend was a stable boy named Adam. And Adam was big and thick. He was as thick as that pillar there. He was a big old dope, so he was. But he was very friendly. He'd never hurt a fly, especially Amelia. The two of them were always hanging out together, thick as thieves. Now, Amelia was very curious about a number of things, especially the fact that there was one door in the house that was always locked. And one day, while Mrs Bishop was out drinking tea and coffee, Amelia was dusting a mantelpiece, and she found a loose brick, and she pulled it out, and behind it she found a key. She said to herself, I know where this key goes. And she ran upstairs with Adam behind her. She put the key into the door, she turned it, and lo and behold, it opened. Inside, she couldn't believe what she found. Little small bedroom, but it was jam-packed full of treasures of all kinds. Silverware and gold and jewellery and chandeliers and all kinds of clothes like you couldn't imagine. There was a ruby red satin dress lying on the bed. She thought it was lovely. She'd never seen anything like it. She looked around and then she threw it on over herself and she started prancing around like one of the actresses in the plays. Even though she'd never seen a play in her life, she said she'd give it a go anyway. And she did a pretty good job of it too. For a while. It started to go off the rails a bit. But anyway, Adam was standing in the corner and he was laughing away at her. With his big stupid laugh. Stupider than that. Suddenly, there was a chill in the air, and as they looked, they saw a figure lying on the bed. It hadn't been there before. It was old Mr. Bishop. Amelia recognised him from his portraits in the hall. It was his ghost lying there just before he died, gasping and wheezing for breath. Then, when they turned around, they saw Mrs. Bishop, but as she had been years before, maybe 30 years ago, a relatively young woman, she walked into the room. It was a sort of a vision, a flashback, if you will. She walked over to Mr. Bishop and she picked up a pillow and she put it over his face. And he started to struggle and fight, but he wasn't as strong as her. And she stood there with a smile on her face and she held it down until he didn't move anymore, and that was the end of him. He was dead. Amelia realised that what she'd seen was a vision of what really happened. Adam ran out to the door, but Amelia wasn't behind him. He turned around and he said to her, You killed your husband! No, that wasn't what he said. He said something else. He said, come on, Amelia.
Come on, Amelia. Get out of here.
Yes, but she didn't want to go till she got some wealth in her pockets because she was going to run away. So she started packing a bag full of things. Well, she turned around and there was Mrs. Bishop standing in the doorway, except it was the real Mrs. Bishop this time. This time, what Amelia said was,
Aha! You killed your husband!
brilliant! Because she knew that it had really happened. Well, she was a brave girl. Brave, but stupid. Because Mrs. Bishop walked up to her with her stick and clocked her over the head and then dragged her out of the house, down the steps in front, across the road and into a boat that was sitting there on the quays. Adam was stunned at what he'd seen, stunned and horrified, but he was hidden behind the door. He followed them out. He ran across the road. He looked in a porthole, and what did he see? Mrs. Bishop standing behind Amelia with a wire wrapped around her throat, the other end tied to a stick, and she tightened it and tightened it and tightened it until Amelia's neck burst open and 25 pints of blood washed over the deck of the boat. And Mrs. Bishop kicked her corpse like a dog into the water, and it floated away. Adam ran to the police straight away, but they didn't believe him. How would Mrs. Bishop do a thing like that? She, a lovely rich old lady. But he had admitted to them that he was an accomplice in a robbery, so they threw him in jail. They found the corpse of poor Amelia 2 weeks later, still floating, still with that bag of riches. What good they were to her now. She was bloated. Her face was bloated from the water. And she had rats. Oh, look out, she's covered in diseases. Don't let her touch you, for God's sake. Oh, she had no sense of personal space. She was long dead. And she weaved in and out of the ducks and swans that were sitting in the water. And she drifted away. She drifted and drifted. You'll never get that smell out of you. She drifted until she was eventually found. But still she drifts. She drifts around the streets to this day. And Mrs. Bishop never came to any justice. Then as now, the rich never see jail time, only the poor. Tragic, tragic indeed. Shout out at them.
Yes.
And it's very simple. It goes, when you're dead, stay dead. And if you see any changelings or any doulicons, then you shout that out, and hopefully it'll chase them away. I'm going to count to 3, and I want you all to shout, when you're dead, stay dead. 1, 2, 3.
When you're dead, stay dead.
Outstanding.
Good job.
One more time. 1, 2, 3.
When you're dead, stay dead.
Thank you very much. Good night.